Very good. Thank you. Greetings in Jesus' name. A wonderful opportunity we have once again to gather and worship the Lord and strengthen and encourage one another and reach out to each other in truth. Just want to open the meeting with a prayer and a few thoughts, or maybe there's many thoughts I have. And so if there's any requests that anyone might have, we can pray for anyone or things that are on your minds that need prayer. Of course, those that are missing, we can pray for them. The Leroy's are not coming due to the weather conditions and sickness, so we can pray for them. Dwayne's kind of similar. So let's stand and pray. O God, our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your ways, attributes are above searching out. And you're the mighty Father, the creator of the universe. To you we bow this morning and we worship you. We want to do this in sincerity and truth, uprightness, and in faith. Just pray that you be with those that are sick and not able to be here. Pray for healing on their bodies and strength for their spirit. Be with those that are out and about doing various other things, and pray for them. Bless their efforts. Just pray for those that no one in mind, but just those that could be here or could be in your kingdom or could be with us and choose not to. Just pray for a lost and dying world, so that they could see the call that you put on each one's heart. Turn to you. Bless our time of fellowship and help that our speech can be seasoned with grace and that all things can be edifying. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Well, I have some thoughts from Hebrews chapter 11. I guess I want to direct our thoughts. Ultimately, I want to direct our thoughts to whatever it might be that it is that we need to make it, to endure into the end. And partly I chose this chapter because I started thinking about my desire to see good examples, people that I could rely that what they lived out in their lives was the true faith. It was the thing that I need to pursue after, and I need to teach it to my family and my wife, and so I didn't know where else to go but to Hebrews chapter 11. There's just so many people in there with this example that I want, and I see that I need it. So the subject would be faith, but I think there's so much in that we mention things like commitment, or we mention things like obedience, and selling all that we have in our whatever it might be. But I do think that those three things are pretty vital: faith and this commitment and this obedience. It's all just one ball of thread with pretty much the same color. So even above all that, according to 1 Corinthians 13, we surely can't leave out love in all this. 1 Corinthians 13 points out some pretty big things about love being the ultimate thing that we need. If we have faith to move mountains, but we don't have love, we're empty. That's what it says. So maybe the most important thing would be love. But being that Hebrews chapter 11 uses the word faith, that's going to be the theme. Faith is in the world of education, I think it would be a verb. It describes an action, or else, or something close to that, if I have it right. So I want to read it in a way that as we go through it, we will notice what faith did, and we will pick out the verb words throughout this. Faith moved people to sacrifice. Faith moved people to be obedient, and so on and so forth. Verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So we can just see real easy there, like if there's an insufficiency in this faith, quite quickly people will not see the need to make a commitment, because this faith it has substance, but we can't see it. It is evidence, but we can't really see it or feel it, and so we need something beyond the human senses in order to obtain this. By it, the elders obtained a good report. Through faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. So if we just look around quite quickly, we can understand this verse. The things that were framed by the Word of God, the things that we see, they were made of things that we don't really have to understand the substance of it. It was spoken by the Word into creation, and that's well enough. That's good enough. That's how it was. How do we understand it? Through faith. And so here the action word or the verb, if I'm not stretching it anyhow, would be understand. Through faith we understand. Faith motivates us, or faith moves us, or enables us to understand. This is something the world is very insufficient in. The unbelievers are completely lacking of it. This is why atheists, when we meet them, that's why they think it's a foolish thing to think of it in this way, but we can just see why. It is because they are insufficient and very lacking in this great thing called faith. Verse 4, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. The verb word here, the action word here would be offered. Something that Abel did. He offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Cain had an action word too, but it was completely lacking and void of faith. He had an action word. His action word would have been an action of displeasure. First of all, it was seen by God in Cain's in Cain's figure, in his stature, God noticed that he's displeased, and he confronted him about it. Rather than repenting, he turned completely bitter and just killed his brother. How wicked. But the action word for Cain would be, rather than offering up a pleasing sacrifice, he killed. And he was very lacking in this faith. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. And I'm not sure that I can really find an adjective in there, or a verb, that is a action word. We just read there that before his translation, he had a good testimony. What was it that Enoch was doing that was so good? He just simply was worshiping God. And just in my little mind and in my how it goes, I would say that he was probably faced with real life temptations, just like you and I are. And through standing against these temptations, and through denouncing the things of the world, it's reported here that he had a testimony of pleasing God. So much so that he was translated. He was taken up. He did not have to go through these pains of death. Such a good example of our spiritual life. If we stay in tune with God, if we just don't squander our time in wrong things, and we do things that please God, in the Spirit, we can be translated too. We can be taken up. Verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. As we go through here, I don't want to miss the things that God did. I'm trying to make special note of the things that people did, such as Abel offering a sacrifice, Enoch doing this thing that pleased God. But throughout here, I think we can find things that God did. The thing that was needed. I would say that it would be an action of God to translate Enoch. It's something that God did, not something that was done by the effort of Enoch, other than a good testimony. And so, see if I can find another one. If someone sees some of these things, just point them out. But I'm seeing God being active in this thing here as well. Herein would be what I would call the relationship between God and man, a righteous person and God. God, I think somewhere it says God warns us. Yes, right in the next verse it says, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear. So here we see God with an action word, and he warned Noah. And that warning moved him with fear. So this thing was flowing like God did his part, Noah did his part. God did his part, Noah did his part. And on it goes. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is by faith. Let's see, is there a different word for that word condemned? Any other translations use anything different? By the which he condemned the world. That's a verb. That's an action word. I think people's consciences were perked by what Noah did. Some of them, most of them, thought of it as being a foolish thing and laughed him to scorn. But I think there was a condemning that went on in what Noah was doing that pricked the people, and in that way they felt condemned. They probably felt bad. Go ahead, Louis.
It's just a definition of it. Judge worthy of punishment. Kind of same thing.
Sure. So Noah judged them worthy of punishment. Not that he punished them, but he judged them worthy of it. Yeah. Yeah, I guess being condemned doesn't mean that person then is the one that's going to. Okay, so if there's a judge that condemns a prisoner or something, doesn't mean that judge is actually the guy that's going to go get the whip and whip him. He probably has people to do it, but in that way, I think Noah, through his righteous actions, he condemned them, but he didn't take judgment or wrath or anything into his own hands. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, here we see God doing his part in developing this relationship. When he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So we see God and Abraham having a relationship. I want to have this deep in my memory whenever I'm confronted with these people that push this button about it's all about relationship with God. I would like to ring that with an amen and say, look at what Abraham did. He was called and he obeyed, and relationship has to be something within that realm. Not just something that is, I'm pretty sure I've heard people say something close to this, like, oh yes, I have a relationship with God. I talk to him every day. And then when you speak with him a little longer, you realize that what they really are doing is pleading with God to bless them in ways that feel good to their flesh, in ways that make them popular, in ways that are very selfish. And I don't call that a relationship at all. I call that more something that a person is doing to appease his conscience in a very selfish way. I'm not sure what that could be called, but other than just something lacking a relationship. This faith that Abraham had got him looking. It says he looked for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Got him to obey, and he got him to look. Like he was on the lookout. He was on the search. His eyes were open. He was looking for this foundation, seeking after it. And verse 11, through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one in him as good as dead, as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. A few of those describing, or those verbs, action words. Sarah judged him faithful. In her mind, in her judgment of God, she judged him faithful, and she trusted that the things that he would promise would come forth right to the T, just like he said it would. Other things that these people did was being persuaded. They were persuaded of promises that were afar off, according to verse 13. They embraced them, and they confessed. That would be another verb. They confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. Within this faith that it's talking about here, there's seeking that goes on. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out of, they might have had opportunity to return. They were lacking in being mindful of the country wherewithin they were born. What an example. Or maybe we wouldn't say lacking, but they had the quality of not thinking about these earthly benefits, or these earthly things that they have right in their country. And I don't think you would have seen them fly around with a Christian, or drive around with a Christian flag and an American flag. I don't think you would have seen them make statements with all the three colors, the red, white, and blue, and in the Christian form. I don't think you would have seen them do that. But we see multitudes of people doing things similar to that. I don't think they would have tried to make a profit, make money through the name of Christ by having big book sales, or having big craft sales with the Christian name all over it, just making profit from it. Says they weren't mindful of the country. They weren't talking of their country as being a great thing. And they weren't looking for opportunity to return to it. The children of Israel were, but not these people we're talking about here. Abel and Noah and Abraham and Enoch, and they weren't mindful of the country they were in. They were willing and ready and to go wherever God asked them to go. Verse 16. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Do we have that testimony? Do I have that testimony of if God, or we could hear him speak, that he would not say anything that he's ashamed of us? By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Seems like the Hebrew writer just can't get away from Abraham. He's such an example of faith. He was tried. That's an action word by God. God tried him. An action word from Abraham would have been offering up Isaac. I think this is a clear description that Abraham believed in a resurrection of the dead, because it says that he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up. It was in God's hands. For Abraham, this was a matter of, I am called to do it, I am going to do it. Whether Isaac gets called up or not, or whether I go all the way through offering him or not, I'm going to prepare for it, and I'm going to go offer him just the way I was told to do it. Accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. In a certain sense, Abraham, in his heart, had already given up his son as a sacrifice to God, and then in the same sense, he also received him back. I think that's what it's saying. In the same sense, Abraham received back his son from the dead. Like in his heart, and that's so important for us to understand that things happen in our hearts. In our hearts, we do certain things, and God sees it. In Abraham's heart, God could see that Abraham had gone all the way with his son. And in the things that we attempt to do, and before we do them, God knows our intent. He knows what we're going to, what our motive is, and what we really are after. And we can't deceive him. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. Esau. By faith, Jacob, when he was a dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Within this realm of faith, there's things that we do that are like Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, and Jacob blessed both the sons of Joseph. I'm not sure exactly what he did to bless them, but I think he spoke to them and encouraged them and told them of things about to happen. That's important for us today, that we have people, that we have older men, that you're not old, Robert, but you're just older, that we can look to, that would speak to younger men and lift them up and bless them in that way. By faith, that's what I'm getting to. By faith, Jacob did these things, and he blessed both sons of Joseph. And and he worshipped, it says. By faith, Joseph, when he died, made mention of the department of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child and they were afraid of the king's commandment. By faith, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. There's a lot in there that we can learn from Moses. And even his parents, they had the ability to see that he's a proper child, and they foresaw the dangers that he was in, and they hid him. They were, rightly so, they were afraid of the king, and they disobeyed the king. They didn't expose the child like they were supposed to, and they had good reason for that. And that was the beginning point to why I think that Moses had this foundation of having, once he was at age, he was making decisions that, no, I don't want to be called Pharaoh's daughter. He was rather willing to suffer affliction with his people than to be a man that would be highly esteemed as being raised in Pharaoh's palace. No, he was looking for something greater. I don't know, maybe when people called him the son of Pharaoh's daughter, he was like, no, I refuse that. That's what it says. He says he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He wanted to be identified with the afflicted people of God, way more than enjoying the pleasures of sin for a season. Esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of reward. He had eyes of wisdom that could see rewards in heaven. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. Just like his parents, he didn't fear the king. He went and disobeyed him, or went against him. For he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians, as saying to do, were drowned. The Egyptians were attempting to do this thing that could only be done by faith. They attempted to go through a place that only the people that had faith could go through. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. What would be the verb form in that verse? I guess she received a spies, something that she did that that was an action of faith. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David, also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who, through faith, subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead, raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonments. There's many words of action in here that people were doing. Somehow they subdued kingdoms. It says they overthrew kingdoms. And they wrought, or they obtained righteousness. They obtained promises. They stopped the mouth of lions. They were victorious in everything, seemingly. They were victorious against their enemy, whether it was a group of ungodly men or whether it was a beast. These were all done through faith. Without faith, it would have been impossible to do these things. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Scriptures in James says the trying of our faith worketh patience. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder. There's some action words that the wicked people did. They were tempted. They were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheep's clothes, goatskins, or sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens, caves of the earth. And this all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. You can tell here, right in that verse, that that God, the writer here knows that God would want this same thing that they had, that he would want us to have it too. In my New Living Translation, it says, "For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us." So we have the same thing, this faith that works in us. If we have that, we can reach perfection with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and with Noah and Enoch and all these faithful people. Maybe I'll just continue in chapter 12, where it says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witness, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds." Having all these witnesses should enable us, or should move or motivate us to lay aside anything that might hinder us, or or those sins that so easily get our minds and thoughts and our strength down. There truly is a race to run. It's a challenge. There truly is something about enduring to the end that's so real. But it's possible. So that's on faith. I don't have many verses about commitment. I know I had started out with this thinking faith, commitment, and obedience. I mean, it's really all covered in here. How that these people had these things. They had the faith. They had the commitment. What I mean by commitment would be the thought in their mind that they are willing to go into whatever, like for example, Abraham. I think there was a commitment along with his faith that brought forth an obedience. That would be a good example. I want to point out how he was just so committed to go into whatever land he would be asked to go into, to offer whatever sacrifice he was supposed to offer. There's many other things of faith that he did. And there's many, many other examples. I didn't know for sure if I'll touch on New Testament examples. I think it will there's some such fascinating examples in the New Testament of people that just somehow God, Jesus, saw them as having faith. See if I can find... Matthew chapter 9. I think somewhere else this is expressed as well, maybe in Luke, but Matthew chapter 9 is one of my favorites. In verse 18 it says, "While he spake these things, behold, there was a certain rich ruler, worshipped him, saying, My daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hands upon her, and she shall live." It's kind of the same attitude that Abraham had when he was on his way up to offer up Isaac. I believe he believed in a resurrection, and he believed that Jesus is the author, the finisher of this thing, and that he could do it. Jesus arose, followed him, and so did his disciples. And behold, a woman which was deceived with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. And she said within herself, "If I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole." But Jesus turned about, and when he saw her, he said, "Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith has made thee whole." And the woman was made whole that very hour. There's a double example in here. So we see the woman right in the middle of all this happening. She expressed her faith. And when Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the minstrels and the people making a noise, he said unto them, "Give place, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth." They laughed him to scorn. But when the people were put forth, he went in, took her by the hand, and the maid arose, and the fame hereof went abroad into all the land. This could not have happened had this certain ruler not had the faith to believe that Jesus is able to do this thing. It's such a subject of completeness that it's really hard to categorize it here. And so, I mean, we can think of commitment as something that when Jesus went about to make his disciples, he called them to things like, if you want to be my disciple, you have to do this, that, and the other. You have to forsake your selfish ways and take up your cross and follow after me. That would be a call for commitment, and the disciples were willing to take that upon themselves. It produced obedience, and obedience is something that in return can only be done if there's really a foundation of faith. And so we could talk this thing in circles because it's such a tight-knit thing. But maybe I'll just end it again with the thought of, if we even have faith of moving mountains, but we're still lacking this one thing. Anyone remember what it was that I mentioned in the beginning? Love. Yeah, if we're lacking in that, I'm not sure exactly what it says there, but we still don't have the whole thing if we don't have love. So I'm going to leave it at that. I would think that there'd be many thoughts that you have that could be shared, and open it up for that.
Thank you, Brother Atlee. It was a good, let the word speak for itself on faith, the exposition of faith. And I thought of, as you started out, you did one verse from chapter 10, I believe. In verse 23, let us hold fast the profession of faith. And then verse 24, let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. And there's a connection. I mean, like you said, faith, Paul says in Galatians, faith working through love, and then provoke one another, or motivate one another, stimulate one another unto love and good works. And so it seems to be the other side of the coin. Although in verse 1 of chapter 11, it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for. So now we got faith, hope, and love, as you mentioned earlier from 1 Corinthians. But now abide faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. But they are, it seems to be all, they're connected for faith. And the just shall live by faith. One of the men, as you touched, on a faith that obeys, and all the verbs, I appreciated the verbs of all, from blessing to offering to refusing. One of the people you just briefly touched on in verse 32 was, you just mentioned him, is Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. But I'll mention something about David. In our home Bible devotion this week, I went into 1 Samuel chapters 22 to 27, and David went to Ahimelech and said, hey, I'm on a secret mission from Saul. And he lied, and then of course we know that the priest Doeg killed 85 of the priests and all the women and children and the donkeys and the animals because of David's lie. But one was spared, Abiathar, the high priest. And David felt terrible because his whole family was wiped out by his lie. He was running from Saul, of course, but he lied. But in that, you think of the Psalms. David, in his 7 years during his running away from Saul or whoever, Absalom, he wrote the Psalms. And so they're 3,000 years old. When Saul had a terrible spirit, what would he do? He'd get for David to play the harp, and he would soothe the spirit. Now when David is older, and he's fleeing from his enemies, what does he do? He reads his old Psalms for his soothing. He gets his soothing. Saul is dead. Now he gets it by reading his old Psalms. And what do we do today, 3,000 years down the road? Yeah, Seth likes them. I like them, the Psalms. We just do this, and we get the same edification or the same faith from reading the Psalms. And David, you can just talk about David in 1 Samuel. David is, in the way he pours out his heart, my Lord, why have thou forsaken me? Or he's just, I'm a worm. I'm not even a man. Everyone reproaches me. And you think that how easy we have it today. Daniel Schneider's in Bangladesh, and Brother Walter Jr. is thinking of going over there, but really, do we really have the same type of persecution that they have, or something like that, as far as the faith that endures? The Lord be magnified.
I don't know if you had gotten to chapter 12, but there's encouragement in there for staying faithful. And So therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witness surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? And I guess I could go on a while, but